Today I'm going to talk about something, you could call it serendipity, or you could call it fate, or you could call it, gee whiz, that's strange. But some years ago, I think it was about 1985, I subscribed to a magazine called Bible Archaeology Review. This is what it looks like. And I subscribed to it for about 2 years or so. And then I let the subscription lapse. And in the intervening years, I came here about 1990, 89, 90, and learned about this congregation and joined it. And one of the members here was a subscriber to Bible Archaeology Review. That's BAR. If I use BAR, that's what it stands for. And he would kindly bring the issues that he had read over to Bernice's house. And so during Sabbath service one time, I happened to be walking through and I saw it, and I said, oh, well, isn't this grand? Because I really enjoyed that publication. And so, waiting for services to start, I picked up the one that was there, and I started reading it, and I came to the letters to the editor. And I looked at it, and I about near did a double take. Because in the letters to the editor was a second letter by Professor Anson Rainey, professor of Semitic languages, Hebrew University, Tel Aviv, Israel. And I couldn't possibly improve upon anything that he wrote in this letter because he's a Hebrew linguist, And I'm sure all of you have heard at one time or the other a variant in the pronunciation of the sacred name. We've certainly had a few that's come through here with all kinds of things. But if you wanted to know how to pronounce a word in Hebrew, what its meaning was and so forth, you would go to a Hebrew linguist, the best that there was. Well, here's a professor, he actually hailed from Georgia, been over there years and years and years. He is a Hebrew linguist. Therefore, if he were going to give some information about the pronunciation of the sacred name, speaking for myself, I jumped on it like a duck on a June bug, I'm gonna tell you. And as I was reading it, it dawned on me that that the professor, and I can only believe that this whole thing happened because the Almighty Yahweh caused it to happen. I feel sure that Yeshua the Anointed looked down at me and said, Anthony, it's time to get on the ball again. And so the title of my sermon is The Linguistics of the Sacred Name. And the subject is going to be the pronunciation of Yahweh by a Hebrew linguist. Now, there's a lot of people you'll see on the internet, they'll write articles about all the variant spelling and so forth and so on. That's all fine and good. If they're Hebrew linguists, you could say the same thing about a Japanese linguist. Who should know how to pronounce a word in Japanese better than a Japanese linguist? So I'm now going to read you the letters to the editor, which are separated by 9 years. When I first subscribed to BAR, I read it and I saved it because I was in the sacred name back then when he first. And here it is 9 years later. I'm subscriber in New Orleans, Louisiana, Metairie, Louisiana. And 9 years later, I'm here, Panama City, and this little congregation here, which isn't exactly as big as our corporate image by having a phone number and a website implies. We're not that big. But the Almighty Yahweh saw fit to have me here, and I truly believe it. He put me here and he put me in his congregation. So here I am telling you this story, and now I am going to read to you the letters to the editor by Professor Anson Rainey. Remember, they're 9 years apart, and the serendipity is who would have predicted I, living in Metairie, Louisiana, 9 years later, being here in Bernie Sunday's house in the Cove, and I pick up a magazine, the Bible Archaeology Review, that a fellow believer sitting right here today shared with Bernice. But that's the way it happens. So now I'm going to read his letter. So please bear with me. I try not to read, but sometimes it's totally unavoidable. And I have gone over and punctuated what Professor Rainey said. He's since deceased. As accurately as possible. I checked this 3 times to make sure every bit of the emphasis is here. Bible Archaeology Review, July-August 1985, queries and comments, page 78 and 79. Question: how was the Tetragrammaton produced? To the editor. This is Professor Rainey starting off his letter. To the editor, : an editorial note in Bar in the November-December 1984 states that the pronunciation of Yahweh for the Tetragrammaton is by, quote, scholarly convention, unquote. It should be noticed that there are many strong linguistic and epigraphic arguments in favor of Yahweh as the correct form. There are Greek inscriptions from religious papyri in Egypt. There are personal names in biblical Hebrew ending in comma, YAHU, which is the typical, quote, short form, end of quote. And then he has some grammatical terms here. Parentheses. Jussive, Jussive, comma, i.e., commands and past tense. Now, this has to do with Hebrew grammar. Jussive, commands, past tense, for the verb forms of the particular type in which the last 2 consonants were originally wa, W-A-W, and yod, Y-O-D. The long form of those same verbs end in -EH. The anglicized form, Jehovah, is a ghost word based on the 4 consonants YHWH with the vowels of another word, Adonai, meaning my Lord. The Hebrew scribes of the Middle Age put those vowels in to remind the reader to say Adonai rather than pronounce the sacred name. But in the first syllable, they nevertheless put in an E rather than an A, so as not to cause anyone to see the syllable YA hyphen and inadvertently blurt out the sacred name. This is just further proof of the correct first syllable, which in any case is confirmed by Greek spellings and the evidence of Hebrew linguistics. So Yahweh is not just some sort of quote, scholarly convention, unquote. Professor Anson F. Rainey, Tel Aviv University, Tel Aviv, Israel. Well, 9 years later, in Bible Archaeology Review, the September-October 1994 issue, queries and comments on page 53, he sends them another letter. How Yahweh was pronounced. To the editor, you done it again. In a footnote to J. Glenn Taylor's article, which was in the May-June 1994 issue on page 53, you say, no one knows how YHWH was pronounced, but it is usually vocalized as Yahweh. This, despite the fact that you had published my letter, how was the Tetragrammaton pronounced, in the July-August 1985 issue on page 78 to 79, in which I gave the epigraphic and the linguistic evidence in support of the pronunciation Yahweh. Parentheses, I'm still getting correspondence from all over the world in response to that letter. One of those pieces of correspondence was mine. First, I mentioned the evidence from Greek transcriptions in religious papyri found in Egypt. The best of these is, and I will spell it here, capital I, A with a umpla on the top, O-U-I-E with a horizontal dash on the top. And that was in the London papyri on page 446 to 482. And he goes on. Clement of Alexandria said, quote, the mystic name, which is called the Tetragrammaton, is pronounced I-A-O-U-E, which means who is and who shall be. Now, that's a verb. Who is and who shall be is a verb. The internal evidence from the Hebrew language is equally strong and confirms the accuracy of the Greek transcriptions. Yahweh is from a verbal root, asterisk HWY asterisk, which means to be. This root usually shows up in Hebrew as HYY. Incidentally, I put some copies of this on the tables there for those who would like. Let me stop a moment and pass them out, please. For those who want them, of course. I believe I gave you one. Did I give you one yesterday? Or maybe it was your husband. And I know, Gregory, I gave you one. Winners, I'll give you mine. I'll give you mine.
No, that's mine.
I'll give you mine.
We can buy some copies.
I made 10 copies. Thought that would be enough. To continue, this root usually shows up in Hebrew as HYY. It is a verbal root developed from the third person pronoun asterisk HUWA / asterisk HIYA. The grammatical, and I'm on page 2 for those who have a copy. The grammatical form of Yahweh is the third person masculine singular prefix conjunction. I said this fellow was a linguist. He's got this description down as fine as one could possibly imagine. The YA hyphen is the third person masculine singular prefix. Again, if you want to know something specific about a language, ask a linguist. An average person walking down the street who gets a Hebrew grammar and thinks they know something about Hebrew, needs to read this. In Jewish tradition, it is forbidden to pronounce the sacred name, and its true pronunciation is supposed to remain a secret. Now, I tell people this, and it's true, I got into a taxi cab on 42nd Street, and I told the driver I wanted to go to 42nd Street in Lexington, which was the headquarters of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And I looked on the back of his seat, the driver's name was clearly a Jewish spelling. I don't remember, Erdesheim or something like that. And so when we got to the destination, I said, I am a serious student of comparative religion, and I would like to know how to pronounce the sacred name. And he said, oh, well, he said, it's been forgotten. I said, I know that it hasn't. It has not. But I also know that you're taught from childhood not to pronounce it. And he kind of, I said, well, and I was getting out of the cab, I said, is it something like this, Yahweh? And he went, in Jewish tradition, it is forbidden to pronounce the sacred name, and its true pronunciation is supposed to remain a secret. The fact is that the Jewish tradents, parentheses, who put the vowel points in the Hebrew text into parentheses. At the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, after the construction, rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem, authorized by Nebuchadnezzar, and subsequent kings in Persia. There were no vowel points. And one of the things that Ezra did was to take those existing scriptures and compile them together. Now, in all probability, they were written in Paleo-Hebrew, not Hebrew square script that we see now, not this. And Ezra compiled all of this stuff that was written in, and he compared it, and where he would see divergent pronunciations or spellings, he supposedly corrected it and issued the temple scroll in square Hebrew. The reason he did this was so that nobody could get up and claim afterwards that their copy, most likely in Paleo-Hebrew, was the original. He had the original. He made the original. All right. The fact is that the Jewish tradents who put the vowel points in the Hebrew text, and they did this because as Jews moved into diaspora, which was Greek-speaking, they began to use Greek so much they forgot how to pronounce words. And so these tradents, and this is where the Septuagint comes about, this was the Old Testament translated into Greek, and that was one of the tools that was used in the translation that resulted in the King James Version Bible. But they put vowel points on the Hebrew words. These Hebrew words don't show them, but there would be vowel points here. And they put vowel points so that the reader would learn from reading it what the true pronunciation was in Hebrew. The fact is, the Jewish tradents who put the vowel points in the Hebrew text borrowed the vowel from another word, Adonai, which he has here as, quote, my lords, end of quote, or Elohim, quote, capital G-O-D, end quote. They avoided the very short A vowel in this borrowing because it might have led the synagogue reader to make a mistake and pronounce the first syllable of the sacred name, namely hyphen Y-A, Yah. The vocalized form one finds in the Hebrew Bible is usually Y with E in superscript, H-O-W-A-H, Yahweh, from which we get in the English form Jehovah. Now, Jehovah is nothing but an artificial ghost word. It was never used in antiquity. The synagogue readers saw Yahweh and read it as Adonai, The final syllable of Yahweh, hyphen A-E-H with the H in superscript, is normal for the imperfect indicative form, parentheses, present, future, or past continuous, close parentheses. A form like Yahweh developed from Y-A-H-W-I-Y-U. The development of hyphen I-Y-U to E-H in superscript is thoroughly demonstrated for the verbal system in general. The form Yahweh seems to be from the causative stem, hipfil, and apparently means he who causes to be, become, be, a verb. The theophoric component on so many personal names in Judah, such as Y-A-H-U, Netanyahu, in such names as Hezekiah, which is Hezekiah, is the normal shortened form of a verb like Yahweh. For example, the verb to do obeisance in the imperfect is Y-I-S-T-A-H with the A in superscript, W-E with the H in superscript. While the shortened form, parentheses, for preterite or Joseph is Yatsi-Yahu. In other words, Yitztayu is to Yitztayeh, as Yahu is to Yahweh. This is not hocus pocus. Any layman can readily comprehend the equation. You don't have to put, now he's writing the letter to the editor. This rest is to Herschel, who is the editor of Bible Archaeology Review. He's kind of chastising Herschel. So just imagine that he's talking to the editor now. You don't like to put linguistic details in bar. They're, quote, too technical, unquote. But this does not prevent you from printing various items of linguistic misinformation without warning your readership. Here I refer to the description of the final component, parentheses, not a suffix, but a component, exclamation point, close parentheses, on personal names found in seal impressions. The theophoric component in Northern Israelite personal names written hyphen YW on epigraphic text was never found pronounced hyphen YO exclamation point. The final W did not come into use as a marker for the final O vowel until post-exilic period. Now, Herschel Shanks is his name, Herschel Shanks. He did a really wonderful thing, and I want to tell you about it because he deserves the credit. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, these scholars gathered together, and remember those scrolls, some of them was in pieces. There was lots and lots of fragments, and it was a job putting this stuff together. So they gathered together experts, and they were working to put all these fragments together. Well, Herschel kept expecting, after 15, 20 years, 30 years, that there would be a product, that they would come up with a completed document. Didn't happen. But the further the project went along, the big pieces, the big important pieces, started to come together, and what was left was a lot of little fragments, and they would spend hours going together trying to fit these things together, hopefully could get a word or a sentence. So in 1949, a photograph was made of all of this effort, and it was available to scholars only. Well, Herschel Shanks found out that there was a copy, and he managed to get his hands on it, and he published it. Well, it was a big uproar. These scholars said, well, we're not finished yet, And Herschel said, well, how long is it going to take? You've been working on it for 49 years. So this isn't a lifetime job, guys. You gotta produce something. Well, anyway, all of this rhubarb, hubbub, it all settled down, and many people today can get copies of this who heretofore couldn't. And so even though Professor Rainey is taking Herschel Shanks to task here, Herschel did a really great thing. Let's see here. To continue on, in the 8th and 7th centuries, when we have these personal names ending in hyphen YW, the W was a consonant and the pronunciation was hyphen YAW, or YAU in parentheses. So anyone can see the difference between the northern YAW and the southern YAHU is not so great, especially since the hyphen H hyphen in the southern form was fairly weak. And this is where a lot of the people who think that they are Hebrew linguists because they read a Hebrew grammar, this is where they kind of mislead people. Apparently there was a Galilean dialect of sorts that existed. You had a pronunciation, say, in the south of Israel and a pronunciation in the north of Israel. They were similar but not the same. And so when people stand up and they get all upset about, well, you're not pronouncing the sacred name right, it's sometimes often just where the word originated. Now he's back twisting it into Herschel Shanks again. Israeli archaeologists avoid Hebrew linguistics like it was poison ivy. Thus, on the basis of modern pronunciation, without asking any linguists, they have created ghost words like IMMADIYO, comma, ZKRYO, or GADDIYO in Samaria, Ostraca. And in your Dan article cited above, the hyphen W in those names should be sounded like the hyphen W in words like Raglaw, his 2 feet, written RGLYW. Notice it's all consonants. The first word had the vowel A, and the second word written RGLYW, like Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Yod, the Y, the A doesn't appear because it's a vowel. And YAHWE, E doesn't appear. A reader of Hebrew knows, as he's taught that way as a child, to insert the vowels. He said, compare Genesis 24:32, et passim. Israelis, of course, pronounced the form RAGLAV because of the European background of many revivers of modern Hebrew. Incidentally, that same European background is where we get the V in Jehovah instead of the original W. Now, you'll have people who'll get up and they'll argue for pronunciation of the V in a word like, say, Jehovah, when he just as explained, this is a Hebrew linguist, and from the great detail that he's gone through that I've read, knows what he's talking about. He knows what he's talking about. You'll frequently see the V and the W as two letters transposed. The sound of the W people will pronounce as a V, and the sound of the V they'll pronounce as a W. So if you look at a sign down the street and it says they're a Volkswagen dealer, if you go to Germany, it would say he's a Volkswagen dealer. If you see a woman with some turnips and she's washing the dirt off of them, you would say she's washing her vegetables. But you'll get people who'll go to the wall. No, it's not Y-A-H-W, it's Y-A-H-V. Shoot me. Obviously, here again, he's obviously, just before I finish that same European background frequently is Germanic. It comes from the transposition is Germanic, like Volkswagen. It's frequently from Europe. And that's where you get Yiddish. It's a large German component into the Hebrew. Obviously, my letter in 1985 did not impress you, but the evidence for Yahweh as the correct pronunciation for the sacred name is at least as strong as the view that Sennacherib destroyed Lashstratum III. Now he's talking about archaeological discovery. And one of the ways that you date archaeological discoveries is if you can find pottery and you can associate it with a known period, then you can say something about the relative times that this pottery was made and broken. You can also do it with layers. Sometimes in certain areas, the conquerors set fire to everything, and there'll be a layer of carbon and dust on top of it. So you find that layer in various places, and if you go 2 or 3 miles apart and see two settlements, and you find a layer of carbon, you can pretty well sure that these happen at about the same time. He continues, the same can be said for the pronunciation -YAW and not the pronunciation -YO. At least you should ask a scholar whose opinion you do respect, such as Frank Cross or Joseph Nave or André Lemire. André Lemire, a French archaeologist, is pretty famous. He's written some articles about specific areas. And now he talks about one of them. Speaking of Lemire, I heartily endorse his new reading of BYTDWD as The House of David on the Mishla stele, the House of David restored in Moabite inscription. If you've ever seen that, it's a big rock, and on it is carved a battle. It's similar, I believe, to what is in 2 Kings. But on that stele, in Paleo-Hebrew, Yod-He-Vav-He appears. Furthermore, I have a gut feeling that both the Mishnah and Dan inscriptions have to do with events in 853 to 851 BEC. Namely, that the battle in which Ahab, the king of Israel, died while his ally Jehoshaphat escaped unharmed, and the later invasion of Moab, I think the king of Damascus, not vassal of his as appointed, are recently by S-A-H-I-T-U-V, Russian pronunciation, I suppose, in his article, Israel Exploration Journal, close parentheses, set up the stele in Dan to commemorate that victory. Likewise, the closing of the Mishnah stele probably have to do with the invasion of Moab by Jehoshaphat and Ahab's son Joram, as depicted in 2 Kings 3. Many Bible scholars deny that Ahab died a violent death or that Jehoshaphat took part in the war recounted in 2 Kings 3. After poring over the evidence and all the arguments for over 20 years, I am convinced that those negative arguments are specious and that the Bible testimony to both events is reliable historically and chronologically. One may refer to maps 126 through 130 in the new version of the Macmillan Bible Atlas. And then he has like a little footnote with an asterisk. An asterisk before a word indicates an undocumented reconstruction. Parentheses, hypothetical, end of parentheses, and he closes the letter. Anson Rainey, professor of ancient and Near East cultures and Semitic languages, Tel Aviv University. Now, during the off-season, Anson Rainey would be called upon by various nations and groups and funds that were endowed to come over and read these little clay tablets that they would find in what is now Iran, parts of Iraq. And some of these tablets had been deciphered beforehand. But these libraries and whatnot, like the British Library, they would hire him to come over and relook at it in light of all of the evidence since their original translation and see if they had been accurately interpreted to begin with. Professor Rainey also had comments about the name Yeshua. I don't have them here, but I can bring them tomorrow for those who are interested. My point in doing this is because I wanted to impart to you saints that there is strong linguistic evidence for what we do and for why we do it. And if you encounter somebody who wants to get into an argument or wants to debate the spelling or something like that, just refer them to Professor Anson Rainey. Thank you.